Hi everybody, Marc Champ from More Financial here. Today we are joined by Richard Whitehouse from Sancus. How are you today, Richard?
I'm good, thanks, Mark. Really good.
Excellent. Well, we're glad to have you here. Really excited to hear about Sancus and your background and what you guys do in the market. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about Sancus and yourself and where you sit?
Yeah, sure. So Sancus is a short-term residential real estate lender. We're primarily a development finance lender, so that tends to encompass everything from ground-up construction through to refurbishment of property, bringing kind of derelict property back to life, but all of it in the residential real estate space. So we've been running since 2013. The business was founded offshore, so we still have a big presence in Jersey, Guernsey, and Gibraltar. And so latterly, 2018, we opened offices in Ireland, and now we cover the whole of the island of Ireland from Dublin. And we have a head office in the UK here in London, and we cover the remainder of the United Kingdom from London. And we write loans in the region of £500,000 funds out through to £25 million funds out. Our core tends to be somewhere in the 2 million through 8 million space, generally building something between 5 and 25 units. So building homes for people effectively, or essentially through our development partners.
Yeah, because I've been aware of you guys probably since about 2017, 2018. And my first contact I had with you was with somebody in the Isle of Man, I believe. Yeah, it was a little while back now, but I know obviously you've got Jackson, who I've got a good relationship with, and he's very visible in more ways than one.
Can't miss him in a crowd, can you?
No, you can't. And it's nice when I walk around and I have Jackson and Joe, who works with me. They're both quite tall, and it is quite nice to have that protection, as well as a friendly lender on my side. So no, it is good. But you guys, where I have seen a real win when I send deals to you is you don't just come back with the terms. What you come back with is an appraisal of the site and the deal itself. And it's almost, when Jackson comes back to me, he comes back with, has the customer thought this? We disagree with the asset values and things like that. And it really does make people think, and it has actually affected the way the customers proceed. And I'm saying that from a positive point of view. It really does make them think and gives another angle to your lending proposition.
Well, I think we always set the view that we're a reasonably small company. There's about 40 of us across our various jurisdictions or our 3 territories. And the kind of the view of the type of people we try to bring into the company are always, we want kind of deep-seated expertise. We want people that kind of really buy into the way that we operate. And our focus is very much on the relationships that we build, whether it's with people like yourself or actually the clients that end up borrowing our money and kind of paying our wages effectively. And we're very conscious that it's very easy to lend money, but to do it well requires you to really understand the projects that you're getting involved with. And I think we took the view right at the very beginning that the right thing for us to do is to use the benefit of our expertise. And if I run you through the people in our business, you'll be looking at people with 20 plus years in lending and or 20 plus years in property development. So our parent company is our largest shareholder, is a property development company in their own right. They buy strategic land. They've had a huge hotel portfolio across the world. And amongst other things, they're building a new city in California. So the people that we work with in that company have deep-seated property expertise. We have a property director who's an ex-main board director for a national homes builder, and our group credit director is for 40 years of lending in 30 years, I should do with this service, 30 years of lending in property development and sort of banking environments. And you would see that kind of background all across the business. And we want to use that expertise to benefit our clients really. And that means at the very front end, and the stuff you talk about with Jackson, before we start spending the client's money, we will spend several days often going through the proposal that's been put in front of us, sense checking, as you say, values, build process, procurement processes, expected build costs, the guys will go as deep as looking on Environmental Protection Agency's websites for flood risk. We'll look at ground conditions, all the sorts of stuff that a developer will consider throughout the project, but we want to make sure that we're ahead of the game, so that when we come back to you and to that client, we can be pretty detailed right from the very beginning about the things that we want to understand, the questions we've got on some of the diligence that we've done already, and then be very clear about the process for the client to get from the first contact they've had with us through to actually getting them through to money. And I think we talk a lot in my business about certainty and certainty of outcomes. And I think, particularly if you're a developer, you're dealing with an awful lot of variables day in, day out. So having somebody that understands the dynamics and the variables and how they might present themselves, I think is very useful. But you probably want somebody that can at least provide you one element of certainty, and we can do that by telling people the facilities we can provide.
And I think customers really do appreciate, especially the experienced customers out there. If a lender just comes back with terms straight away, these are the generic terms, it's almost like they haven't actually properly considered the proposal. When you come back with a proactive strategy on how to proceed with a particular project, a customer gets a more warm feeling that you've actually had a deep look into this. You understand the risks. You understand the actual purpose of the development, because that's what I find when inexperienced people come to us and look for finance. They don't have a purpose for the development. They know that there's a pound sign at the end, or there should be a pound sign, but they don't know what the purpose of the development is, and they also don't know what the exit is. Yeah. And when we appraise a development proposal, or in fact a heavy refurb, we work backwards. What is the end goal? Then how are you going to exit the development facility, and then work through to the actual development facility, and how you're going to present that as best as possible. So that's the feeling I get from you guys. You really do have an end goal in mind, rather than just getting terms out.
Let's always start with who's going to live in it at the end.
Yeah.
And then work, as you say, work back from there. What are they prepared to pay? What do they expect to be in there? If we were talking earlier in the week about a development of 5 executive homes, 2,000 square foot properties. And the first things that we start to think about are quality of the kitchen fit out, what white goods are going in there. We're looking for office space, the share of ground floor living space versus bedroom space, because we know those are things that those buyers are considering at the point that they come to make a purchase decision. So we'll get quite detailed even into the design of the individual properties that help us inform a decision around where we think we can support in terms of the development. So I think your point is extremely well made. If a developer hasn't considered who's going to buy the property at the end, then they're probably starting at the wrong place.
So what would you say to people who are looking to get into development? What can they do for themselves to give themselves the best chance of success?
One, engage with a good broker in terms of the finance that they're looking to take.
If I know any, I'll let them know.
Yeah, so we one or two out there. If you certainly, but I think and I say that glibly, and I know that's the purpose partly of our conversation. But as a lender, we see as a business, and I say we're a reasonably small business. We see somewhere in the order of £400 million worth of inquiries every month. So that's a huge amount of wood for us to chop through. And like any company and any business, we're trying to look for the loans from our point of view that have got the greatest chance of success. And that's from the likelihood of them wanting to transact with us through to the likelihood of us wanting to provide the money. So having a good advisor on board that can present a case to us with the information that we'd be looking to find our way through or to evaluate makes a huge difference. And you'd be amazed at the number of emails we get with 3 numbers on there and a postcode, and we're supposed to go and make the best out of it. And you won't be surprised to hear that they go to the bottom of the pile. And I think a lot of that feeds, and I think the reason that you contacted me initially, it feeds a fairly one-dimensional view of what the finance offer should be. And when you have intermediaries that are behaving in that manner, in terms of that, here's an email, 2 lines and a couple of numbers. Really, they want you to come back with a term sheet that quotes a price and a leverage number on there, and then they're just trying to win a deal, I think, based on kind of the cheapest price and the best leverage. So I think there's a lot of bad advice goes into the market. So at a starting point, I'd say if you're a developer looking for finance, don't come too early. A lender will always give you a sense for what we can do, but when you're serious about it, make sure that you've done some design work, you're kind of reasonably advanced in the planning process, you know what you're building, you can carefully articulate who you're going to be selling the property to, what your marketing strategy is, and have some substance that sits behind the numbers, the build numbers particularly, and also the expected sales values. And don't go by Rightmove. That's usually a bad place to start. We're a big believer in historic sales data and getting a good sense of what properties are genuinely selling for. So I think be critical and be cynical of your own information would be a starting point, because we probably will be too.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because we do get quite a lot a build cost put forward by the customer, and the ones who have got not that much profit in the deal seem to be able to build things cheaper than anybody else. It's crazy that I don't know why that happens, but
achieve excellent GDVs off the back of it as well.
Yeah, it happens time after time, and if you go back to some of them and say that, they almost get offended that you're questioning their build costs, and they say, we've got the best trade, we've imported timber in from, I don't know, Slovakia or somewhere like that, and it's like, well, in the real world, this probably won't work for you, especially if you're inexperienced. You'll get taken for a ride. So why don't you do it to the cost to start with, and then as you get more experienced, then you can maybe develop other ideas. So
I think just on that point, they will find a lender that will take their cost schedule and work with it. But I think it's an incredibly dangerous thing for the developer to do, because that lender will take the view that all problems are the developer's problems. So when the developer finds that they're struggling to build for the number they first put forward, the lender invariably stops lending and says, well, you need to make up the money before I as a lender start putting new money in again. So you end up with this what appears to be a great offer from the lender at the outset, but has already got a few time bombs built in there in terms of funding throughout the life of the project. And I think your point's really well made, that you listen to what the lender's saying, listen to what the professionals in terms of QSs and monitoring surveyors are saying in terms of costs, because they're not often that far out, and make sure that you're building loan structures and or equity capital stacks for your project that works to the biggest numbers possible in terms of costs, because that gives you the best chance of getting to the end. And if you save some money along the way and you don't use the full loan, that's a good outcome. But better to have money available that you don't use than not have money available that you need.
So where would you say you guys are different on the lending piece?
So I think the first thing I'd say is that bit around the upfront due diligence. By the time somebody's engaged with us properly, we are pretty committed to doing a deal, so they'll know the shape of what we're looking to do. And I think in life, we have deep-seated expertise in the business. And one thing we always say to clients is that we know, and the client should know, something's going to go wrong in their project at some point. We just don't know what it is, when it is, or how big it's going to be. But what we do know is that we as a business have got the expertise and the appetite to find our way through those challenges. We're kind of acutely aware that we only get our money back when properties are built and they can be sold and everybody can be repaid and profit can be distributed back to the developer. So I guess our starting point in terms of focus makes us different. And then we are, I said, reasonably small communication lines. A client will deal with the same person in our business pretty much throughout their journey with us. And that means our incentives are aligned much more closely with the developer's objectives. We have to live with our promises at every step of the way. And I'm not sure everybody else is structured in that manner. And then I think we provide good leverage. We are a stretched senior debt provider, so we can go up to 75% loan to GDV, and that would help the developer either be less reliant on more expensive mezzanine or equity funding, and/or they don't have to commit so much of their own capital to a project, so it allows them to improve their return on equity and/or go and invest in other projects so they can run more than one at the same time. So I think we're kind of we've built ourselves around a developer rather than built a lending company and asked developers to kind of fit in around us.
And you allow interest roll up on your facilities?
Yeah, we take the view that every development project really only has a cash event when stuff starts to sell. So I don't think I can't recall a development loan we've ever written where we'd expect the interest to be serviced. But I think on that point, and costing and pricing in general, there's a whole bunch of sort of potential pitfalls for borrowers just in terms of the way that a lender might describe their costs and fees, and it's probably worth touching on that a little bit. I mean, first thing I would say on that, value rarely equals price. So my first thing, before you even consider that what leverage percentages or pricings on a term sheet, for the developer, I would say, look, just look at what the facility that's been proposed and just make sure that functionally it does what you need it to do. And anything else, no matter how attractive the pricing may or may not look, if it doesn't functionally deliver what you need it to do, just take it off the table. Don't try and make it fit, because you'll end up giving yourself a headache later down the line. So that would be my first thing. Like, value probably isn't price; it's probably driven by the functionality of the facility. But when you get into price, there are, and you guys advise very well on this, in fairness, but there are a whole bunch of minefields in my mind. So firstly, I'd say most pricing is usually expressed as a percentage, and borrowers kind of often make the mistake of comparing those percentages and thinking they've made a good comparison. And so my first tip for anybody would be, say, the percentage is fine, but it's a percentage of what, and it's the what that really matters, not the percentage. So I think there are kind of four areas that when I look at competitors' term sheets or when I'm talking to a borrower, there are four things rather I'd ask them to consider, and those would be the fees, the interest rate, ancillary charges, and then a method of comparison across the various lending options they've got. I'm happy to run through that, Mark, if you think.
Yeah, definitely is, because it makes a big difference. We can provide two sets of terms to a customer, and one says, I don't know, 0.75 a month, the other says 0.9 a month, and the 0.9 a month could be more cost effective and fit for purpose than the 0.75. Sometimes it's hard to get that across. So yeah, feel free. Okay,
so let me go then. So fees would be the first thing I mentioned. The fees generally break into two areas, kind of in fees, so the money you pay at the point or before you borrow money, and then exit fees, so generally the money you pay at the end of the loan. And I think the big point around those fees is they tend to be based on in fees would be commitment fees and arrangement fees, and they can be based on generally either something we call the net loan or the gross loan. And the net loan is the loan principal, really, so the amount of money that will be transferred from the lender into the borrower's bank account during the course of the project. So it's actually money they get to use. The gross loan is the net loan plus the interest that loan will accrue over the loan's life. So that it's not dead money, because the lender should be paid for the work they do, but from a borrower's perspective, you're never going to see the interest. It's not going to transfer to your bank account. It's a bill that you owe at the end of the loan. And so quite often you'll see most lenders will charge their fees against the gross loan. So if you think you're getting £1 million from the lender and that's the loan, if they're charging you 2% against the gross loan, then your arrangement fee at 2% would be £24,000. Other lenders, and I'd say we are one of them, without plugging us too much, we would charge our fees against the net loan. So that same 2% on £1 million, if you're at Sancus, would be £20,000 rather than £24,000. But the number on the page still says 2%. So there is the potential for a borrower to say, well, they're both 2%, so there's no difference. The reality is, if you're paying fees on net loan, then you're 20% better off than you would be by paying fees on gross loan. So those cost differences can start to rack up really, really very quickly. And then similarly on the exit fee, if it's on net loan, generally the exit fees would be 1%. It's reasonably standard across the market, but that can be measured against the net loan, the gross loan, or possibly even the GDV of the project. So back to that £1 million I mentioned. If it's on the net loan, that's a £10,000 fee. I'm sure you can do the maths, Mark. But on the gross loan, it becomes a £12,000 fee. But let's say your GDV on this project is £2 million. Suddenly your exit fee, which is still 1%, so the same percentage as everybody else's, that's now a £20,000 fee. So by comparing the percentages alone, you can end up in wildly different costs than you might do if you broke it back to pounds, shillings, and pence. So I made my first thing on your arrangement fees or in fees, and on your exit fees, just work out exactly what it is against, and then convert that to a pound number, and then I keep a schedule of that because we'll get onto comparison in a little bit. But that would be my starting point. Look at those fees, really make sure you understand what they've been measured against, and then the next bit, and probably the biggest component cost-wise of your facility, is going to be the interest that you're paying. And there's a lot of different ways of this being presented, and a lot of ways of perhaps mistaking the interest rate you think you're paying. So 4 big points for me on interest. Firstly is understanding the basis on which the interest is calculated, and that can be a compound basis or a simple interest basis. Simple interest means that you're only ever paying interest on the loan principal, so the net amount of money that's been provided to you. If you're paying a compound basis, then you're paying interest on interest. So every time the lender accrues interest, they charge you interest on the new higher loan amount. And that can make a very, very big difference in terms of the true cost of borrowing the money. So when you see, I say, a number 8% on a term sheet from a lender, if that's a simple interest, then 8% means 8% for the life of the loan. But if it's a loan that's compounded on a monthly basis, then your 8% probably means 8.5% by comparison to a simple interest rate. And some lenders will compound their interest on a daily basis. If they do that, the 8% you're looking at really means 12%. So it is a huge, huge difference from the number you think that you're reading. So again, I would say make sure you understand the basis for interest calculation, and then convert that into the expected bill in pounds that you think you're going to pay, and put that on your schedule of costs so you understand exactly what you're paying and kind of move away from the percentage that's in front of you. Then the second part to understanding the interest bill is aligning it with the cash flow of the project. Most lenders will make assumptions on how you're going to draw the money, and invariably those assumptions will be designed to make the facility look like it's got a lower interest burden than it may otherwise have. So kind of ignore the lender's cash flow, look at your own cash flow, and if you need help from somebody like yourselves, then ask for it. But measure the interest cost against your own assumed cash flow or your own S-curve, and then use that cost as the basis for comparing facilities, because that is likely to be more realistic than the number the lender puts in front of you. Third point would be on the rate. Is it a fixed rate or is it a floating rate? And particularly, there's a lot of noise in the environment right now about interest rates and base rates. So if your rate's fixed, then obviously it isn't going to change over the course of the loan. I wouldn't say it's wrong to take a floating rate. And as an aside, my suspicion is that the availability of fixed rate loans will diminish, if not disappear, in the very near future. But it's probably more around understanding what interest or base rate rises might mean for the loan, and make sure that your project can cope with those changes in cost. And then the final point, if it is a variable rate loan, generally that loan will be quoted as a rate plus Bank of England base rate or a lender's standard variable rate, and they're often not the same. So I would encourage a borrower, if they see a loan that is variable rate, if the floating rate element of it, that sort of Bank of England base rate, make sure the lender's pegging their loan to a third party's base rate. And by that I mean, when it says it's 6% plus Bank of England base rate, it's the Bank of England, not the lender, deciding what they're doing with that base rate. If it says bank standard variable rate, then there's every possibility that the bank could turn around next month and decide that their standard variable rate's now 5%, irrespective of anybody else's or any other kind of economic changes or Bank of England decisions. So try and make sure you're pegged to a third party reference rate. So four things for me on interest are check whether it's compound or simple, and then make sure you understand the compounding basis if it's compound. Work it out against your own cash flow, not the lender's. Check whether you're fixed rate or floating, and if you're floating rate, check what the reference rate is for the floating to make sure that there's some level of control around that. I think then the third thing I mentioned was ancillary fees. So a lot of lenders will give you what looks like quite an attractive front page of the term sheet, and then you turn it over, and on the back of it you see it's £2,000 for a drawdown. There's a £500 charge for phone calls. There's a chap's fee of £35 plus VAT, and a whole series of tariffs, and they can actually rack up to a fairly serious chunk of change over the course of a loan. So make sure you understand all that kind of tariff schedule or additional fees. There might be non-utilization fees in there, the opening and email fee. There'll be all sorts of stuff in there that the lender's using to make up their money. So just make sure you're clear on what they are. And if there is a drawdown fee, £250 a go, if you're going to draw down once a month for 14 months, add that up and put that into your cost schedule as well, so that you've got a good sense of the total cost of having that facility. So having done all those three things and you've converted all those percentages and charges into pound numbers, then the next thing for me is just list them all out and add them up. And then the best comparison you've got between lenders is to look at those two actual pound cost numbers of one lender's offer versus another's. And you'd be surprised, I think, more often than not, how thin the difference is between lenders on when you actually cost it out versus what looks to be the numbers on the front page. And then I think if you really, really want to get detailed about it, the best thing to do, I think, is to express, then go back to a percentage, which sounds a bit odd given everything else I've said. But take the total cost of the facility, divide it by the amount of net loan that the lender's proposing to provide for you, and actually then the lowest percentage is actually, generally speaking, the most cost-effective option for you. So I say the things for me: compare the fees, check the interest, look at the ancillary rates, and then make sure you're comparing it on a pound basis, not percentages. That's kind of good practice.
Yeah, I think they're all very valid. And what I think a lot of people don't realise is a lot of the money comes from the same place anyway. It's just badged up differently with different bridging lender name on it. So yeah, I think these are really great points, and it's something that probably the training companies out there won't realise and teach to their students. So I'm glad you've mentioned all of that. It's really good.
It's funny, on those training, I don't want to do them a disservice, but it's amazing how many clients we see from training companies that aren't able to talk to us in those terms. And often you think, given the investment people make, this should be kind of core to the course, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. And we want to help people succeed and get to an endpoint that they're happy with. So we'll wrap it up there now, if that's okay, Richard. But thank you very much for that. It's really, really insightful and useful how a lender thinks, and hopefully the people watching will be able to benefit from that. So how could they get hold of you if they need to? Richard.whitehouse@sancus.com, or any of the team through sancus.com. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we'll catch up soon. Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. Good to see you. Thanks, Richard.